My name is Ren Calloway. I am 31 years old. For 22 years, I believed I was dying. Not in the abstract way that all humans are dying. In the specific, clinical, terrifying way that a child believes when her parents sit her down and tell her that her heart is defective and that any moment of physical stress could stop it entirely. I was 8 years old when my parents told me I had hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, a genetic condition in which the heart muscle thickens abnormally, making it harder for the heart to pump blood. A condition that can cause sudden cardiac arrest during physical exertion. A condition that, according to my parents, meant I could never run, never play sports, never work, never drive, never live alone, and never leave the house without someone who could call an ambulance if my heart decided to quit. For 22 years, I lived inside that diagnosis the way a prisoner lives inside a cell. I accepted its walls. I memorized its dimensions. I built my entire identity around its limitations. I did not go to school after 3rd grade. My parents pulled me out and homeschooled me. They said the physical activity and stress of a school environment could trigger an episode. I sat at the kitchen table every morning with workbooks my mother selected and lessons my father supervised. I did not have friends. My parents said social interactions needed to be carefully managed because excitement or emotional stress could elevate my heart rate to dangerous levels. Visitors came to our house occasionally. I was never allowed to visit theirs. I did not learn to drive. My parents said the stress of traffic could trigger cardiac arrest behind the wheel. I was dependent on them for every trip to the grocery store, every doctor's appointment, every glimpse of the outside world. I did not work. My parents said employment was medically impossible. Instead, I cooked, cleaned, did laundry, maintained the house, and cared for my aging grandparents who lived in a converted in-law suite in our basement. I was a full-time housekeeper and caretaker from the age of 14 onward. And while I scrubbed floors and changed sheets and prepared meals for a family that had convinced me I was too fragile to exist independently, my parents collected Social Security disability payments in my name every month for 18 years, starting when I was 12 years old. And they first filed the application, $1,547 per month, $18,564 per year. For 18 years, total disability payments collected, $334,152. Plus, supplemental security income payments they collected during the first 4 years before the disability was approved. Approximately $68,000. Grand total, over $400,000. Paid by the federal government, deposited into an account my parents controlled. Spent on their mortgage, their cars, their vacations, their life. Not mine. I did not have a life. I had a diagnosis, and the diagnosis was a lie. Hamden, Connecticut, a suburb of New Haven. 28,000 people, the kind of town where the neighborhoods are quiet and the houses are close together, and everyone assumes that the family next door is normal because their lawn is mowed and their curtains are clean. The Calloway family lived at 14 Birchwood Lane, a 4-bedroom colonial with a finished basement and a detached garage. My father, Victor Calloway, was a plumber, self-employed. He ran a small operation with 1 van and 2 employees. He made approximately $72,000 a year in good years and $55,000 in bad ones. My mother, Sandra Calloway, was a medical billing specialist at a physician's group practice in North Haven. She made $38,000 a year, but her real expertise was not billing. It was medical paperwork. She understood diagnostic codes, insurance claims, disability applications, and the bureaucratic machinery that determines whether a patient is classified as sick or well. She understood exactly how to make a healthy child look sick on paper. Let me describe what it was like to grow up believing you were dying, because the physical captivity was only half of it. The other half was psychological, a prison built inside my own mind, constructed with medical terminology and parental authority and the unshakable belief that my heart could stop at any moment. I was afraid of everything. Stairs, because climbing them elevated my heart rate. Laughter, because intense emotion could trigger arrhythmia. Hot weather, because heat stress put additional strain on a compromised cardiovascular system. Cold weather, because vasoconstriction increased blood pressure. I was afraid of joy. I was afraid of anger. I was afraid of surprise. I was afraid of my own body. Every heartbeat was a potential threat. Every flutter in my chest was evidence that the disease was progressing. Every moment of breathlessness was a preview of the cardiac arrest my parents told me could come at any time. My mother reinforced the fear constantly. She kept a blood pressure cuff in the kitchen. She checked my pulse every morning and every evening. She recorded the numbers in a logbook she kept in a drawer by the refrigerator. "Your resting rate is slightly elevated today," she would say. "Let us keep things calm. No vacuuming, no stairs, just rest." Or, "Your blood pressure looks good this morning. You can do some light cleaning, but nothing strenuous. If you feel any chest tightness, stop immediately and tell me." Every day, for 22 years, a daily medical briefing from a woman who was not a doctor, but spoke with the authority of one because she understood the language. My father's role was enforcement. Victor Calloway was a large man, 6'2", 220 pounds, hands roughened by decades of plumbing work. He was not physically abusive. He never needed to. His size and his silence were enough. When I expressed frustration about not being able to go outside or see friends or do anything a normal child does, my father would sit across from me at the kitchen table, fold his enormous hands, and say one sentence: "You want to die, Ren? Because that is what happens if you push yourself." I did not want to die, so I did not push. At 14, I became the family's full-time housekeeper. My grandmother, Dorothy, my father's mother, had moved into our basement after my grandfather died. She was 72 then. She had diabetes, early-stage dementia, and mobility problems that required assistance with bathing, dressing, and meals. My parents assigned her care to me, not with a conversation, not with a request, with an assumption. "Ren is home all day anyway. She can take care of Dorothy. Home all day anyway." As if my captivity were a convenience rather than a prison sentence. I cared for my grandmother from the age of 14 until she died when I was 26. 12 years. I bathed her, dressed her, prepared her meals, administered her insulin injections, after my mother showed me how. I sat with her during her confused nights when the dementia made her forget where she was, and she called out for my grandfather in a voice that broke my heart. I loved my grandmother. She was kind to me in ways my parents were not. She called me her sunshine. She told my hand when I was afraid, and whispered, "You are going to be fine, Ren. Your heart is stronger than they think." I thought she was being poetic. She was being literal. After Dorothy died, my grandfather on my mother's side, Earl, moved in. He was 81. He had Parkinson's disease and needed constant supervision. I cared for him for 3 years until he passed away when I was 29. 15 years of full-time caregiving. Zero compensation, zero recognition. And the entire time my parents were cashing disability checks that said I was too sick to work. The lie required maintenance. Like any machine, it needed regular servicing to keep running smoothly. And my mother was an excellent mechanic. She had access to the medical billing system at her physician's office. She understood how diagnostic codes worked. She knew which codes corresponded to which conditions and what documentation was required to support a disability claim. When I was 8 and the lie began, she created a fabricated medical history. I do not know exactly how she did it. I was a child. I did not understand the mechanics of medical fraud, but I have since learned from the Social Security Administration's investigation that she submitted the following documents to support my disability application. A diagnostic report from a cardiologist in New Haven, claiming I had been evaluated and diagnosed with hypertrophic cardiomyopathy at age 7. The cardiologist named on the report, Dr. Franklin Mathers, was real. He practiced in New Haven until 2009. But according to his office records obtained during the investigation, I was never his patient. He never examined me. He never wrote the report that bore his name. My mother had fabricated the report using letterhead she obtained through her job at the physician's office. She knew the format. She knew the language. She knew what the Social Security Administration needed to see. She also submitted annual follow-up reports, purportedly from Dr. Mathers, and later from a cardiologist named Dr. Irene Cho, documenting my ongoing condition. Each report described worsening symptoms, increased medication needs, and continued inability to work or function independently. Dr. Cho was also real. She was also never my doctor. She confirmed this during the investigation. She had never examined me. She had never written a report about me. Her name had been used without her knowledge or consent. For 18 years, my mother generated fake medical reports on an annual basis and submitted them to the Social Security Administration to maintain my disability benefits. She rotated doctor names. She updated diagnostic codes to reflect new medical standards. She adjusted medication lists to match current treatment protocols for hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. She treated my disability fraud the way she treated her job, professionally, meticulously, with the attention to detail that her employer valued in a medical billing specialist. The disability payments were deposited into a joint account in my parents' names, not mine. They told me the money went into a medical trust for my future care. There was no trust. There was no future care fund. There was just a checking account at Webster Bank in Hamden, where $1,547 appeared every month like clockwork and disappeared just as quickly. I never saw a bank statement. I never had a bank account of my own. I never held a debit card. I never made a purchase that my parents did not approve and pay for themselves. I did not have a wallet because I had no identification to put in one. I did not have a driver's license. I did not have a state ID. The only identification I possessed was a social security card that my mother kept in her filing cabinet in a folder labeled Wren Medical. I was not a person. I was a file in a cabinet, a diagnostic code, a monthly deposit, a pair of hands that cleaned the house and changed the sheets and administered insulin injections while the woman who had invented my illness collected the check. At 29, after my grandfather Earl died, something shifted, not suddenly, gradually. The way dawn happens, not with a burst of light, but with the slow retreat of darkness. I was alone in the house during the day now for the first time in 15 years. No grandparent to care for, no meals to prepare for anyone but myself, no bed sheets to change, no insulin to administer. And in that silence, in the empty hours between my mother leaving for work and my father returning from his plumbing jobs, a question began to form. A question I had never allowed myself to ask, because asking it felt like treason. What if they are wrong? The question lived in my head for months, quiet, persistent, growing louder every day. What if they are wrong about my heart? I had never been to a doctor on my own. Every medical appointment I had ever attended was arranged by my mother, attended by my mother, and conducted by doctors my mother selected. I never saw the reports. I never read the charts. I never asked questions because I was taught that asking questions about my condition was dangerous. Stress triggers episodes, my mother would say. But there were things that did not add up. Things I had noticed over the years, but filed away because the alternative was too terrifying to consider. I had never had a cardiac episode, not once. In 22 years of supposedly living with a condition that could cause sudden cardiac arrest at any moment of exertion, I had never actually experienced anything resembling cardiac arrest. No fainting, no chest pain beyond the normal anxiety that comes with believing your heart is defective, no hospitalization, no emergency room visit. I had been told that my medication prevented episodes, but the medication my mother gave me every morning and evening was a small white pill that I now know was a generic antihistamine, not a cardiac medication, an allergy pill, repackaged in an unmarked container and presented to me as life-saving medicine. I also noticed that my mother's behavior around my condition was performative. She checked my blood pressure with great ceremony when my father was present, but rarely bothered when we were alone. She talked about my condition in hushed tones at family gatherings, but never brought it up during our daily routines unless someone else was listening. The diagnosis existed for an audience. When the audience was gone, the diagnosis relaxed. At 29, with no grandparents left to care for, and entire days stretching ahead of me empty, I did something I had never done before. I walked to the public library. It was 6 blocks from our house, the farthest I had walked alone in years. My heart pounded the entire way, not because it was defective, because I was terrified. 22 years of being told that exertion could kill me had created a fear response so deeply embedded that walking 6 blocks felt like jumping from a building. But I walked, and I did not die. And when I arrived at the library, sweating and shaking and very much alive, I sat at a computer and typed 2 words into the search bar: hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. I read for 3 hours, medical journals, patient forums, diagnostic criteria, treatment protocols. I read about the symptoms I had never experienced. I read about the tests that are required for diagnosis: Echocardiogram, cardiac MRI, genetic testing, Holter monitor. I had never had any of those tests. Not one. In 22 years of supposedly living with this condition, I had never been tested for it. Not by a doctor I had actually met. Not by a doctor who had actually examined me. The diagnosis existed on paper, not in my body. I went back to the library every day for 2 weeks. I researched, I read. I made notes in a spiral notebook I bought at the dollar store with the $3 I found in my father's coat pocket. Then I made a phone call. I called Yale New Haven Hospital's cardiology department and made an appointment. The receptionist asked for my insurance information. I did not have any. My parents had never enrolled me in health insurance because officially I was on disability and covered by Medicare, but I had never seen a Medicare card. I did not know my policy number. I did not know if I actually had coverage. The receptionist transferred me to the financial assistance office. I explained my situation. A woman named Patricia listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said something that changed my life. "We have a charity care program for uninsured patients. We can see you at no cost. How soon can you come in?" I went the next day. October 14th, 2023. Yale New Haven Hospital, Cardiology Department. 4th floor. I sat in the waiting room in a chair by the window and watched normal people walk in and out of the building. People with jobs and cars and wallets and phones. People who went to doctors when they were sick and went home when they were well. People whose parents had not invented a fatal disease to keep them trapped in a house for 22 years. Dr. Amara Okonkwo called my name at 10:15. She was in her late 30s, warm eyes, calm voice, the kind of doctor who looked at you when she spoke instead of at a computer screen. I sat across from her in the examination room and told her everything. The diagnosis at 8, the medications, the restrictions, the 22 years of being told I could die at any moment, the fact that I had never been tested by a doctor I had actually met. She listened. She did not interrupt. She did not react with the shock I expected. Instead, she nodded slowly with an expression I would later recognize as controlled professional fury. "Ren," she said when I finished, "I am going to run every cardiac test available today. We are going to find out exactly what is going on with your heart." She ran 5 tests that day. Electrocardiogram. 12 leads attached to my chest measuring the electrical activity of my heart. The test took 10 minutes. The results were normal. Completely normal. No evidence of thickened heart muscle. No evidence of abnormal electrical patterns. No evidence of anything resembling hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. Echocardiogram. An ultrasound of my heart. A technician pressed a probe against my chest while I lay on my side and watched my own heart beating on a screen for the first time in my life. The image was mesmerizing. A fist-sized muscle opening and closing with perfect rhythm. The technician smiled. "Looking good," she said. The echocardiogram showed normal heart wall thickness, normal chamber size, normal valve function, no hypertrophy, no abnormality of any kind. Blood pressure, 118/76. Textbook normal. Resting heart rate, 68 beats per minute. Normal. Stress test. I walked on a treadmill while electrodes monitored my heart. The speed increased gradually. My heart rate rose. 100, 120, 140, 160. My lungs burned, my legs ached, but my heart kept beating, steady, strong, unremarkable in the most beautiful way possible. No arrhythmia, no abnormal response, no evidence of any cardiac condition whatsoever. Dr. Okonkwo sat me down after the final test. She had the results on her tablet. She set it on her lap and looked at me directly. "Ren, I have your results. All 5 tests. I looked at each one carefully and I consulted with 2 colleagues to confirm." She paused. "There is nothing wrong with your heart." I stared at her. "You do not have hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. You have never had hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. Your heart is structurally normal, functionally normal, electrically normal. By every measure available to modern cardiology, you have a perfectly healthy heart." The room tilted. Not physically. Something inside me shifted. A foundation I had built my entire life on cracked and began to crumble. "That is not possible." My voice sounded far away. "I have been diagnosed since I was 8. Dr. Okonkwo held up her tablet. "Do you have copies of the original diagnostic reports?" "My mother has them. I would like to see them, because based on what I am seeing today, there is no medical basis for that diagnosis. None." She leaned forward. "Ren, I need to ask you something difficult. Is it possible that someone fabricated your diagnosis?" The room went very quiet. The hum of the hospital ventilation system, the distant sound of a cart in the hallway, my own heartbeat, my perfectly normal, perfectly healthy heartbeat, beating 68 times a minute, the way it had always beaten. The way it would have beaten if I had gone to school and made friends and learned to drive and gotten a job and lived a life. 22 years. 22 years of believing I was dying. 22 years of fear and isolation and dependency and cleaning and caregiving and pills that were antihistamines and reports that were forgeries and a diagnosis that never existed. Yes, I whispered. I think my parents made it up. I did not go home that day. Not immediately. I sat in the hospital parking lot for 2 hours. The engine off, the windows down. October air moving through the car I had taken a taxi to because I could not drive, because my parents told me driving would kill me. I called the one person I trusted, my cousin Angela. She was 33. She lived in Hartford. We had seen each other at family gatherings over the years, but never spent time alone because my parents controlled every interaction I had. Angela answered on the second ring. "Ren, are you okay?" I told her everything. The appointment, the tests, the results, the 22 years, the pills that were antihistamines, the reports that were forged, the diagnosis that was invented. Angela was quiet for a long time. When she spoke, her voice was shaking. "Ren, I need to tell you something." She breathed. "I have suspected for years that something was wrong. Not with your heart, with your parents. The way they kept you isolated, the way your mother controlled every conversation about your health, the way you were never allowed to see anyone without supervision." She paused. "I asked your mother once when I was 25. I asked why you had never been to a specialist at Yale or Hartford Hospital. She got angry. She said you were being treated by specialists she trusted, and that outside opinions could be confusing and dangerous. Confusing and dangerous. Outside opinions that might reveal the truth were confusing and dangerous to the lie." Angela drove to New Haven that evening. She picked me up from the hospital parking lot where I was still sitting. She took me to her apartment in Hartford. She made me dinner. She gave me her spare bedroom. I slept in a bed that was not in my parents' house for the first time in my adult life. I did not sleep well, but I slept free. The next morning, Angela helped me make 2 phone calls. The first was to the Social Security Administration's Office of the Inspector General, the fraud hotline. I reported that disability benefits had been collected in my name for 18 years, based on a fabricated medical diagnosis. I provided Dr. Okonkwo's contact information and authorized her to share my test results. The woman on the phone asked me to describe the situation. I spoke for 20 minutes. When I finished, she said, "Miss Calloway, we take these reports very seriously. An investigator will be assigned to your case within 72 hours." The second call was to a lawyer. Angela had researched attorneys who specialized in disability fraud and medical abuse cases. She found a woman named Judith Crane at a firm in New Haven. Former federal prosecutor, now in private practice. Judith listened to my story without interrupting. 30 minutes. When I finished, she said 2 sentences. "Your parents imprisoned you for 22 years using a fake diagnosis as the lock. I am going to help you break it open." I did not go back to my parents' house. Not that day, not the next day. I stayed with Angela. I borrowed her clothes. I ate her food. I existed in her spare bedroom like a refugee from my own life, which is exactly what I was. My parents noticed my absence by the second day. My mother called Angela's phone because I did not have my own. "Where is Ren? She needs her medication. She cannot be away from home. This is dangerous." Angela's response was controlled and devastating. "Aunt Sandra, Ren saw a cardiologist at Yale yesterday. She had 5 tests. There is nothing wrong with her heart. There never was." The silence on the other end of the line lasted 11 seconds. Then my mother hung up. She did not call back. The Social Security Administration's Office of the Inspector General assigned Special Agent Denise Harmon to my case. She called me on October 21, 2023, 7 days after my appointment at Yale. Agent Harmon was in her late 40s, former IRS investigator. The kind of voice that communicated patience and precision in equal measure. She had seen fraud before. She had seen family fraud before. But what she told me later was that my case was among the most disturbing she had encountered in 18 years of federal service. She interviewed me for 4 hours at Angela's apartment in Hartford. She asked about everything. My childhood, the diagnosis, the homeschooling, the isolation, the caregiving, the medication, the blood pressure checks, the way my mother controlled every doctor's appointment and every piece of medical paperwork. She asked about the pills. Can you describe them? Small, white, round. My mother kept them in a brown prescription bottle with a handwritten label that said Ren, cardiac medication. Did the bottle have a pharmacy label? No, just my mother's handwriting. Agent Harmon made a note. She asked me to describe the pills in more detail. I did. She pulled up a database on her laptop and showed me photographs of various medications. I identified the pill immediately. Cetirizine, generic Zyrtec, a common over-the-counter antihistamine. For 22 years, my mother had been giving me allergy pills and telling me they were keeping my heart alive. Agent Harmon also contacted Dr. Okonkwo at Yale New Haven Hospital. She obtained my complete test results. She obtained a written statement from Dr. Okonkwo confirming that I showed no evidence of hypertrophic cardiomyopathy or any other cardiac condition, and that in her professional opinion, I had never had such a condition. Then, Agent Harmon did something that would crack the case wide open. She pulled the original disability application my mother had submitted in 2005. She compared the diagnostic report attributed to Dr. Franklin Mathers with Dr. Mathers' actual patient records. Dr. Mathers had retired in 2009, but his practice records had been transferred to his successor at the same cardiology office in New Haven. Those records contained no file for Ren Calloway, no appointment records, no billing records, nothing. Agent Harmon also contacted Dr. Irene Cho, whose name appeared on subsequent annual reports submitted to Social Security. Dr. Cho confirmed she had never examined me, never written a report about me, and had no knowledge that her name and credentials were being used in disability filings. 2 doctors, both real, both practicing in New Haven, both completely unaware that their names were on fabricated medical reports submitted to the federal government for 18 years. My mother had not just lied, she had committed identity fraud against 2 physicians. She had used their credentials, their letterheads, and their professional reputations to construct a medical fiction that kept her daughter imprisoned and the disability checks flowing. On November 15, 2023, Agent Harmon executed a search warrant at 14 Birchwood Lane, the Calloway family home. My home, the house I had cleaned for 22 years while believing my heart could stop at any moment. I was not present for the search. Angela and I waited at her apartment. Agent Harmon called me that evening. Ren, we recovered extensive evidence from the residence. Her voice was careful, measured. The voice of someone delivering information that was simultaneously validating and devastating. In your mother's filing cabinet, we found a folder labeled Ren Medical. Inside were copies of every fabricated diagnostic report submitted to Social Security over 18 years. We also found blank letterhead from the cardiology practices of Dr. Mathers and Dr. Cho. Your mother had obtained these letterheads through her job at the physician's practice, where she worked as a billing specialist. She paused. We also found a handwritten log in your mother's handwriting tracking the disability payments, dates, amounts, running totals. She documented every deposit for 18 years. My mother had kept a ledger, a meticulous record of every dollar she had stolen from the federal government, using her daughter's stolen health. $334,152 in disability payments, plus $68,000 in supplemental income. $402,152, all documented in her own handwriting, dated, organized, filed alphabetically. The same organizational skills that made her an excellent medical billing specialist made her an excellent criminal. Agent Harmon also recovered the brown prescription bottle with the handwritten label. The bottle was tested. The contents were confirmed as cetirizine, an antihistamine, available over the counter at any pharmacy for approximately $8. For 22 years, my life-saving cardiac medication cost $8 and could have been replaced by a glass of water and a good night's sleep. The grand jury was convened on January 8, 2024. Federal Grand Jury, District of Connecticut. The evidence was presented over 2 days: the fabricated medical reports, the stolen physician letterheads, the disability payment records, the handwritten ledger, the antihistamine pills, Dr. Okonkwo's testimony, Dr. Mathers and Dr. Cho's statements confirming they had never treated me. The grand jury returned indictments on January 15th. Sandra Ellen Calloway, 8 counts of Social Security fraud, 4 counts of wire fraud, 2 counts of identity fraud for using physicians' credentials without authorization, 1 count of theft of government funds. Victor James Calloway. 4 counts of Social Security fraud, 2 counts of wire fraud, 1 count of conspiracy to commit benefits fraud. Victor received fewer counts because the evidence showed Sandra was the primary architect of the scheme. She created the documents. She submitted the applications. She maintained the ledger. Victor's role was enforcement and complicity. He knew the diagnosis was fake. He participated in maintaining the lie. He benefited from the disability payments. But the paperwork was Sandra's operation. Maximum combined sentences. Sandra faced up to 80 years. Victor faced up to 40. They were arrested on January 18th, surrendered voluntarily at the federal courthouse in New Haven, processed, fingerprinted, released on bail. The conditions of their release included no contact with me. The judge also ordered them to surrender their passports and submit to electronic monitoring. My mother called Angela's phone that evening. The call was automatically logged by the monitoring system as a potential violation of the no contact order. Angela answered. Sandra's voice was frantic. Tell Ren this is a misunderstanding. We were protecting her. The doctors were wrong. She does have a heart condition. We were just trying to. Angela hung up. She reported the call to Agent Harmon. My mother received a warning from the court. 1 more contact attempt, and her bail would be revoked. Derek Calloway, my brother, contacted me through Angela 2 weeks later. I had barely mentioned Derek in the story because Derek had barely existed in my life. He was 3 years older than me. He had left for college when I was 15 and never came back except for holidays. He lived in Boston. He worked in software development. He made $92,000 a year. He had grown up in the same house watching his parents keep his sister trapped. He had eaten meals I cooked. He had worn clothes I laundered. He had watched me care for our grandparents while he built a career and a life and a freedom I was told would kill me. And he had said nothing for 22 years. His message to Angela was brief. Tell Ren I am sorry. I should have said something. I always knew something was not right. Angela relayed the message. I did not respond. Not because I hated Derek, because his apology was too small for the silence it was trying to fill. 22 years of watching your sister live in a cage requires more than 1 sentence delivered through a cousin. The plea negotiations began in March. My parents' attorney, a federal defender named Martin Cross, proposed a deal. Both parents would plead guilty to reduced charges. Sandra to 3 counts of fraud and 1 count of identity theft. Victor to 2 counts of fraud. Sentencing recommendations of probation with full restitution. The assistant United States attorney, a woman named Rebecca Park, rejected the first offer. She countered with a requirement for prison time. The negotiations lasted 6 weeks. The final agreement was as follows. Sandra Calloway, guilty plea to 4 counts of Social Security fraud and 1 count of identity fraud. Sentencing recommendation of 18 to 24 months in federal prison plus full restitution. Victor Calloway, guilty plea to 2 counts of Social Security fraud and 1 count of conspiracy. Sentencing recommendation of 12 months in federal prison plus full restitution. $402,152. I was asked for my input. I had one condition. I wanted to read a victim impact statement in open court. I wanted my parents to sit in that courtroom and listen to their daughter describe what 22 years of captivity felt like from the inside. Rebecca Park agreed. The plea hearing was scheduled for May 6, 2024, United States District Court for the District of Connecticut. Judge Patricia Lamont presiding. Courtroom 3. I arrived at 8:45 with Angela and Judith Crane, my civil attorney who had also become my advocate and my friend. I wore a blue dress Angela had helped me buy, the first dress I had ever chosen for myself, the first piece of clothing I had ever purchased with my own hands in a store I had walked into without supervision. My parents arrived with Martin Cross. My mother was thinner than I remembered. Her face was drawn tight. The meticulous composure she had maintained for 22 years of fraud had cracked. She looked like what she was, a woman who had been caught. My father looked the same, large, silent, his hands folded in front of him. The same posture he had used at the kitchen table when he told me I would die if I pushed myself. The same silence that had enforced 22 years of captivity without a single raised hand. Judge Lamont reviewed the plea agreements. She addressed each parent individually. Mrs. Calloway, You are pleading guilty to 4 counts of Social Security fraud and 1 count of identity fraud. Do you understand? Yes, Your Honor. My mother's voice was barely audible. Mr. Calloway, 2 counts of Social Security fraud and 1 count of conspiracy. Do you understand? Yes, Your Honor. The judge accepted the pleas. Then she turned to me. I walked to the podium. I carried 3 pages, my statement, written over 2 weeks at Angela's kitchen table. Every word chosen with the care of someone who had spent 22 years being told she could not speak without risking her life. My name is Wren Calloway. I am 30 years old. For 22 years, my parents told me I had a fatal heart condition. They told me I could die at any moment. They pulled me out of school. They prevented me from making friends. They refused to let me drive or work or leave the house without supervision. I paused, breathed. They gave me allergy pills and told me they were cardiac medication. They fabricated medical reports using stolen physician credentials. They filed disability claims with the federal government and collected over $400,000 while I cleaned their house, cooked their meals, and cared for their parents. I looked at my mother. You checked my blood pressure every morning. You counted my pills every evening. You told me I was fragile. You told me excitement could kill me. You told me that the world outside our house was too dangerous for someone with my condition. I looked at my father. You told me I would die if I pushed myself. Every time I wanted to go outside. Every time I asked about school. Every time I wondered what it would feel like to run or dance or laugh without being afraid. You said the same thing. You want to die, Wren? I looked at the judge. I did not have a heart condition. I never had a heart condition. A doctor at Yale ran every test available and found nothing. My heart is perfectly healthy. It has always been perfectly healthy. The only thing that was ever wrong with me was my parents. The courtroom was silent. They stole 22 years of my life. They stole my education, my friendships, my independence, my identity. They stole the experience of being a normal human being. And they did it for $1,500 a month. I set down my statement. I walked back to my seat. Angela reached for my hand. Judge Lamont was quiet for a long time. Then she spoke. In 23 years on the federal bench, I have seen many fraud cases. Financial fraud, tax fraud, benefits fraud. But I have never seen a case where the fraud was used not just to steal money, but to steal a life. She looked at my parents. You did not just defraud the government. You defrauded your own daughter. You took her childhood, her adolescence, her young adulthood, and her identity. You convinced her she was dying so that she would stay home and serve you. For 22 years, she paused. Sandra Calloway, 24 months in federal prison, 3 years supervised release. Full restitution of $402,152. Victor Calloway, 18 months in federal prison, 3 years supervised release. Full restitution jointly and severally. The gavel came down. My mother started crying. My father sat motionless. Martin Cross gathered his papers. I walked out of the courtroom into the May sunshine. Angela beside me. The air was warm. The sky was blue. My heart was beating 68 times per minute, the same rate it had always beaten, the rate of a perfectly healthy organ that had never needed saving. It has been a year since the sentencing. I am 31 years old. I live in Hartford, Connecticut, in a 1-bedroom apartment 3 blocks from Angela's house. It is small, 700 square feet. A kitchen with a window that faces east and catches the morning sun. A bedroom with a closet I organized myself. A bathroom with a mirror where I look at my own face every morning and see someone I am still learning to recognize. I have a driver's license. I got it 6 months ago. I failed the test twice and passed on the 3rd attempt. The examiner said I was the most cautious driver she had ever tested. I told her I had spent 22 years being told that operating a vehicle could kill me. She did not laugh. She just said, well, it did not kill you and you passed, and here is your license. I have a job. Administrative assistant at a nonprofit in Hartford that provides services to adults who experienced childhood medical abuse. I found them because they found me. The executive director, a woman named Carmen Reyes, read about my case in the Hartford Courant and called Judith Crane's office. We could use someone who understands what our clients have been through, Carmen said. Would Wren be interested? I was interested. I started at $36,000 a year. It is not much. It is mine. Every dollar earned, every dollar deposited into a bank account with my name on it, My name, not my parents' name, not a medical trust that does not exist. My account, my money, my life. I am learning to cook for pleasure instead of obligation. I am learning to walk for exercise instead of fear. I am learning that a heartbeat is not a threat. It is a rhythm. The most reliable rhythm in the world. My parents are in federal prison. My mother at FCI Danbury. My father at FCI Otisville. They will be released next year. I do not know what happens after that. I do not know if I will see them. I do not know if I want to. Derek came to visit me in January. He drove from Boston. He sat in my apartment and looked around at the small space I had built for myself, and he cried. Not the polished tears of someone performing remorse, the ugly, shaking, uncontrollable crying of a man who had finally allowed himself to feel the weight of what he had watched happen. I knew, he said, not everything, not the details, but I knew something was wrong. I knew you were not as sick as they said. I knew the way they controlled you was not normal. Then, why did you not say anything? Because saying something meant fighting them, and I was not brave enough to fight them. He looked at me. You were brave enough to walk to a library, to call a hospital, to see a doctor, to tell the truth. After 22 years of being told you were dying, you were brave enough to find out you were not. He wiped his eyes. I was not brave enough to do any of that for you, and I will carry that for the rest of my life. I did not forgive him. Not that day. Forgiveness is not a single moment. It is a process, a slow, uncertain, nonlinear process that might take years or might never arrive. But I let him sit in my apartment and cry, and I let him see that I was alive. Truly alive. For the first time, Angela remains my anchor, my cousin, my first phone call, my Saturday morning coffee partner, the woman who answered the phone when I called from a hospital parking lot and said, I think my parents made it up, and did not hesitate for a single second before saying, then let us find out the truth. Dr. Okonkwo checks in every 6 months, a follow-up appointment, not because I need it medically, because she wants to see how I am doing. She is the first doctor who ever told me the truth about my own body. That relationship is sacred to me in ways I cannot fully articulate. If you are still listening, let me leave you with this. For 22 years, I was told my heart was broken, defective, dangerous, a ticking bomb that could explode at any moment if I dared to live a normal life. It was a lie, every word of it. My heart was never broken, it was never defective, it was never dangerous. It beat 68 times per minute for 22 years inside a body that was perfectly capable of running and dancing and laughing and driving and working and loving and living. The only thing that was broken was the trust between a daughter and her parents. And that break was not caused by a genetic condition. It was caused by greed and control and the willingness to sacrifice a child's entire existence for $1,500 a month. If someone in your life is telling you what you cannot do, what you cannot be, what your body cannot handle, ask for proof. Not their proof. Independent proof. From a doctor they did not choose. In an office they do not control. With results they cannot fabricate, because the people who define your limits are sometimes the people who benefit from keeping you small. And the diagnosis that keeps you home might not be protecting your heart. It might be protecting their income. My heart is healthy. It always was. And now it beats inside a body that is finally free to use it. Thank you for listening to my story. If it meant something to you, if it reminded you that your health and your freedom belong to you and no one else, share it, like, subscribe, leave a comment telling me what you would have done. Because everyone deserves to know the truth about their own body. And nobody, not even a parent, has the right to make you sick to keep you close.